Observe.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of the Observe and Rapport Show. I am Kyle Brennan, as joined always by my beautiful co-host, Keith Sullivan. Keith, how are we doing today?
I'm doing good, man.
You doing good?
I'm doing good. The beautiful thing, the way you call me, it's a good thing because I forget that you do that, and it's just, it reminds me,
Well,
That's
because
nice
you're not
that you
just a
say
beautiful
that.
face, right? You're a beautiful soul.
Yeah.
I want to remind people of that, maybe
Yeah.
who are only listening on audio
Sure.
that don't realize, one, how beautiful you are.
You know, on audio, I'm probably better,
You
because
got a beautiful voice. You got a face for radio, as they always say. But I wanted to start the podcast
Sure.
with a question. So a lot of people who listen are just like our friends and family and know how big podcasts are. But like, I'd say I learned a ton about podcasting just from doing it for
Yeah.
the first time. You
Yeah.
think it's just two people just talking, and you're like, how hard can that be? And like, oh, another two guys starting a podcast again. But like, what have you actually learned from doing a podcast? Because it's definitely
that it's
harder
not,
than people.
that it's not
think.
just two guys talking.
Yeah.
That's what I've learned.
I mean, to be fair, it's not
Yeah.
like fucking bricklaying, right? Like, we're not like breaking a sweat and like,
Right.
but it's just like, it's harder than what meets the eye of like,
Yeah. No, it's
know.
not physical labor, but it's it's stupid little things that, like, look, with creating any kind of content with, like, microphones and video involved, like, there's a million things that can go wrong. But still, like, even going into this, I was like, oh, it's just two cameras, like two mics, like, who fucking care? Dude, it never ends. Like, the technical difficulties are real and they're there, and that's all from the technical standpoint.
Because you're doing all, like, people don't realize you're doing all the video and production stuff. Like, I'm just sitting here, you text me like, hey, I'm coming over at 7:30. I sit here in my chair and you set up all the mics. There's like cords going into laptops, and I don't even know what that thing's called, but it's very fancy equipment. And you've invested. This has mostly been all 100% your investment. So it's a testament to the work you've put in.
Yeah, but like I had a lot of this stuff already. Like it's music. I'm a music guy. I'm not a musician in the sense that I get paid to play music, but I play music. I played my whole life. So the cables, the mics, all that. It's called an interface, by the way. The thing that the cables go into. D to A converter, if you will.
Industry jargon.
Yeah,
There we go.
exactly. But
you went to college for
I went to SRT.
audio.
I went to studio recording technology. That was my major in Nassau Community College. It's like Yale, but not exactly.
Right.
And that was my my thing in college, because it's my passion is audio. Like this is the thing, is like I know I do all the production, but I'm dying to do this, Kyle.
Yeah.
Like, this is my favorite thing to do. I love producing. I love content creation. I love editing audio and video. It's my fucking favorite thing to do in the world.
Yeah, and I remember like the first few podcasts, you would text me and be like, "Hey, I'm gonna make a reel," and I would always be very reluctant. I'm like, "No, I don't want to like make you do work on the weekend
Right.
and like just like do the bare minimum, just post a video, whatever." And you would go through all these complicated lengths to get like subtitles, make the formatting and the lighting right, and like all this stuff. And it took me a while to realize, like, oh, I'm not making work for you. Like, you would do this.
No,
like,
I'm
even
begging
if I didn't
you.
ask.
I'm begging you. Like, at first, I had to cut back on asking you to do like more. I was like, I want to do this all the time.
But then I felt bad because I was like, I'm not doing shit. Like, I want to learn this
but you
stuff
don't
too.
have to. You know what you did? You started Observe and Rapport.
Right.
Like, that to me is that's what I was waiting for this whole time, to be honest with you, is like, I could have started this podcast with, I have a lot of friends, like I have a lot of family members, like anybody I work with, like, but I didn't want to just become two guys who talk about nothing, and like, you have what would you call it? Like a brand that you're pushing, or so,
And
or so to speak.
Yeah, and I think you're actually touching on a point of like, what is Observe and Rapport? Like, when people ask, I'm just like, oh, I recommend books. I talk a lot about reading, but I really think a lot of it is, I think you put this in like the YouTube show description, which was like a better description than I could ever come up with, which was like, a channel to discuss wisdom passed on from books, history, and other forms of media, right? And I think me and you do a lot of that, but I also think Observe and Rapport is like just pursuing your passion. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what Observe and Rapport is. I just started it. Like, you look at my first posts, it's me like rock climbing, doing a triathlon. Like, I posted like a video of a kid playing guitar. Like, it was just shit I love and I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
And then over time, I was like, oh, I'm really passionate about books, and that's the thing I would do for free. And for you're passionate about audio and making.
Well, isn't that funny? I've never heard you put it that way.
Yeah.
And your passion called my passion out of me and brought me to you. Like you see how that they spoke the same language there. And I didn't even realize it, but that's what happened. I think that's exactly why we're here.
And I love...
We're both pursuing our passions.
I love when people, you saw it a lot over the pandemic, people would start their personal Instagram page about making mocktails or something, or their Instagram page about reviewing cowboy boots, and you're like you get a follow request, you're like, what the hell is this? But the ones that last are the ones where, I appreciate when it's, someone I went to high school with that now is, reviewing, cheeseburgers in Manhattan.
Right.
But if they're passionate and nerdy as fuck about it and aren't shameful, I'm like, fuck yeah, that's awesome.
Totally.
Do you, man. That's great.
I have a girl, I think she went to high school. I think she was a grade younger than me, cooking with Callie. I follow her. She cooks food and films herself cook. And I'm always liking, and I'll share it even. It's I totally believe in, I like watching other people do what they love to do at the same time.
I've heard people call it, it's definitely not what me and you are doing, but you have pages on TikTok or Instagram, people call it competency porn. So it's these videos. I think you've talked about it, the guy who cooks over a fire in the woods, where he's just he's so competent and
so
skilled with the knife and the cutting and the sound that you're just oh, I could watch this all day. I don't give a shit about a guy cooking fire over fire in the woods, but it's so well done and well crafted that you really just appreciate it for what it is. You've seen videos of guys just making pottery, and I'll just watch it for 20 minutes, and I'm like, why am I watching this guy?
Primitive technology on YouTube, dude. The guy he'll I'm talking about. He'll walk into the dude. I mean the jungle with nothing, not even clothes, and he'll go like that. And then he's like, the video will be, a hut with chimney and stove. Dude, this guy with clay, mud, dirt, and twigs and wood will just, I swear to God, make a whole home.
Oh, I've seen this.
And
have you seen the one where it's the two Native American looking guys? They dig out.
Oh, that's crazy. The two guys, when it's two of those guys, bro, they can build a whole resort.
Jamie, pull that up.
No, they pull a whole resort together, though. These guys with shells and rocks and a waterfall and a pond, a functioning thing. Dude, no, that shit is ridiculous. But
yeah, it goes to show where it's
getting back to the show.
Things that
yes,
we just talked about this downstairs before we came up here with my wife about, people our age now, there's no more everyone works the same job for 50 years. Everyone now has their day job, and then everyone, if they're lucky enough in their spare time, does their hobby. If it makes some money, great. But if not, if me and you haven't made a dime, I haven't made a dime off Observe Rapport other than some affiliate ads I made, $40.
Right.
But I would legitimately, I had a week off in December for work for Christmas. I woke up every morning excited to just write. I started writing a book. I started writing articles. I was on Twitter. I rebranded my Instagram page, did all this stuff. And I was I could do this all day, 9 to 5 and more for free. I would do it every single day. I would do it Sundays, holidays. I love doing it. And people are what are you doing? And I'm I don't know. It's something I love. And you would do the same thing for what you're doing. Exactly.
It's, what really sucked was, to be real for a second, when I was doing the music thing, music is my passion as well, but I think I realized that it's not really music production, it's production. I like creating things, whether it's a podcast or a video or music or anything. I like to create, because I don't know, man, I have this obsession with mortality in a way, where I feel if we're finite, you and me, and as far as the way I am anatomically put together right now, there's a finite time limit to that. But if you make something, that can last, and people will talk about who made that after you're dead and all that. And I'm not saying that's the whole reason, but I think that's the flame. That's what's fueling the fire, is just this obsession with I like creating things that aren't tangible. They're in a metaphysical space that the audio and the video, it's not really, but it's there, and people can, like, having a daughter is like also like that too. Like, she's gonna see this one day. She's gonna watch, like, when I'm not home and I'm working all the time, she's watching the show on YouTube sometimes. Like, my wife will put it on the TV, and like she's like watching Daddy talk, and like, and people also get this misconception that the podcast is like, what are you, just like watching yourself talk? You like, oh, not that I've heard that. Like, people have been I've only received positive feedback from this, to be honest, but like, it has nothing to do with that, It has everything to do with just, there's something that calls to you. Exactly. Like, for you, there's something that just, you can't ignore it. You can't just go, well, I'll just do it. Like, to me, like, it literally eats away at your happiness.
To me, it's like
you have to let this thing. You have to feed it. You can't just ignore it.
To me, it's like when you're really hungry and you just need to eat.
That's why I use the feed analogy.
I mean, since we were little, right? We were always drawing. We were like doing art. We were playing music. We always needed
showing each other music.
We needed some outlet to be like, to express ourselves.
Isn't this awesome?
Through art, or show each other. We would always show each other art, whether it was like funny videos or movies or music and
content.
Like, Tommy makes fun of us, and
he does.
You and your friends, because like, every song we listen to, we'll be like, this is the greatest song ever. Because we just like appreciate, like, we can appreciate the little notes and subtleties of like movies, art, drawings, and books. And like, like you said, it is like the feeling of hunger for me when, like I said, I would literally get up in the morning to go write.
Yeah.
And it's like, what are you going to write about? I'm like, I don't know. I just feel this urge inside of me.
No, dude. It's like it's like you got to take a shit, and you're like, I got to go to I have to go. Like, I have to. Like, it gets like that. It does.
You hear like famous musicians like Keith Richards, just like the riff to like to like a Rolling Stones song, and he's just like, I just need to get up and go play this, right?
Yeah,
it's like the same thing.
It's like you can't control it, and it's almost like I call it a curse sometimes, because in the sense of a curse, like. It's not like it's like, oh, I'm creative, I get to like enjoy and create, and like, oh, I'm gonna make a podcast episode. Like, listen, do you understand the work, the effort, the meticulousness, the judgment you place on yourself? Like, also, like you said, like, I have to tend to this. So other things in your life, like, you'll be like, and I'm not talking about like family and stuff like that, but like, you have to figure out how to make everything work. It's kind of like a curse.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, if you do, because if you don't, you'll be like legitimately sad. You'll be legitimately feeling empty. Like, you have to feed this thing. So it's kind of like, but again, I don't want to call it like it's all negative, but being creative isn't like this like thing you're bragging about. That's my point. Like, it's like just part of who you are, and it's like, all right, part of my quirk. Got to deal with this.
Yeah, and I just read Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, which is literally all about exactly what we just talked about, and he has so much. A lot of people joke about like, what does Rick Rubin do, right? Because he's this famous, like, he's not a producer, like, he doesn't actually make music, or he's just more of like a creative guru, right? He's done music for like Johnny Cash and Jay-Z and Public Enemy and Red Hot Chili Peppers and Beastie Boys and LL Cool J and all these guys. He started from his dorm room at NYU when he was 19.
Yeah,
no knowledge, but he just has such a finger on the pulse of what it takes to do a creative act, and how to treat the process properly. And if it's not working, what valves to push or pull when things aren't working. And one analogy he makes is, or it's not an analogy, but he basically says, like, if you get that urge to create something, like that impulse where you're like, I need to do it now, and you ignore it, it's not that, and you don't act on that impulse, you'll find when some time passes, someone else will have created that in a few years down the line. And it's not that they had the idea, it was that idea was ready to be made. Right. So he almost thinks of it as like, ideas are almost like radio frequency waves flying above us, and when it passes over us, it's our job to grab it and bring it down.
I believe Freud thought that too.
Yeah. Pharrell has this idea of, he says, we have a free library of ideas, and we have a library card. But it's our job every day to go and check out a book.
I love that.
So it's like, you have to go, you have to show up every day and try out an idea, and it might be shitty one day.
But you know what though? To Rick Rubin, like, he also has this, I believe that creativity as a quality of characteristic is, like intelligence in the sense that it's kind of like a crapshoot. Like a genius can be born to two people who aren't geniuses, and a creative person can be born to two people who aren't creative. Because Rick Rubin speaks about his craft and music in a way, man, where he really hears something that not everyone hears too. Mm-hmm. So like, I agree with Pharrell in the sense that like we all have this ability if you wanted to, but no one would ever actually act on it the way Rick Rubin did. Like there is a part of him where you're like, what did he do? He's like an enthusiast. He's just
he's a creative enthusiast.
He's basically a creative enthusiast. Like he tells the story about going to clubs when he was young in college in the city, and like just being totally encapsulated by the music, and like he could not ignore it. That doesn't happen to everybody. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like he's a special person. Not everyone or no one almost can probably do what Rick Rubin did. You ever see that video of him? You know, it's funny. He like barges into the room and he's like, Jay, Jay, you know, I was thinking like, why don't you, instead of starting with the beat, why don't you just kind of like a poet talk the first lyric of, you know, I got 99 problems. No, if you've got girl problems, I got bad for you. Yeah. I feel bad for you, son. I got 99 problems and a bitch ain't one. And Jay-Z's like, oh, okay. Like that wasn't Jay-Z's idea. Yeah. And that's iconic now. Just that nothing but vocal beginning. Like,
and how about like, oh, hey, Johnny Cash, like you're at the end of your life. Why don't you do a acoustic rendition of Hurt by Nine Inch Nails?
Right.
Like who thinks of that?
Right.
You know what I mean?
No one would ever think that.
And it's and that
his obsession.
Johnny Cash's 9 Inch cover of Hurt has I think it's the most streamed, one of the most streamed songs on Spotify.
You know what I love about that fact? Because I've done this. I wear my heart right here, bro. I don't give a fuck. I have cried to that song. I can't even tell you.
Yeah.
And I love knowing that it's the most streamed song on Spotify.
You might have to fact check me on that.
Well, whatever.
It's like it might be the most streamed song on like Johnny Cash's page or something.
Totally.
Like that, yeah.
But it's in the multi millions for sure. And it's like, so that just means that an incredible amount of people have also done that. You know, like everyone looks out the window on the train when that comes on, when you're commuting, and you're like, fuck, man, all the hurt, all the shit you've ever gone through, all those things you never did, all those people you never got to say that thing to, it all comes back to you in that moment. And Trent Reznor even said, who wrote that song, he said that that's Johnny Cash's song now. That's not a 9 Inch Nails song.
That's awesome.
That's a Johnny Cash song. Yeah. He gave it to him. He was like, he did exactly what I wanted to do when I wrote that song, but I didn't, you know.
Yeah, and like you said, Rick Rubin is just this creative enthusiast. Like his ability to just he accepts the process of creativity, and he sees it from this almost like spiritual. It's almost like he can see creativity around us.
Yeah,
like it's almost like he has like a third.
Sure.
Or a sixth sense of the creativity, like if you want to think of it as radio waves, however you want, like he sees it and he accepts when like the creative process is going slow and the artist starts getting frustrated. He's like, okay, let's go a different path. Let's try something different and then we'll come back to what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Maybe you have to let it rest today. Other days you might have to push a little harder and actually keep going down. Even though it sounds like shit, that's where you're actually going to find, like, he just knows the right levers to pull, and it's crazy how much he knows.
Some producers talk about that, like that last bit you just did there, talking about how the pain and it sounds like shit. Like sometimes that's actually right before, that's like not the calm before, that's like when it's about to explode, this moment. You know, producers talk about that where, especially with singers, like, you know, you'll be up at like it's like 2:30 in the morning, and the singer's trying to hit this note or something. It happened with, you know, the guy from Iron Maiden in the number of the Beast song. There's a huge high note he sings, man, and the story is like it's like 2:30 in the morning. He's been doing it all fucking day. Bruce Dickinson's his name. He's super fucking frustrated. He's like, I don't want to do this shit anymore. And because he was that angry and frustrated, he finally belts it out. And like the people talk about, like, you know, Nico McBrain, who's the drummer, he's in the studio. He was like, dude, we all like left our bodies. Like it was incredible what he did. And like Rick Rubin understands that. Producers understand that there's an effort in the human being to make this thing happen that is extraordinary. It's not something anybody can do. So you have to push for it. You have to get there, you know?
And it's interesting. I mean, I see it on a small level when I write. I try to write every day, and I probably have hundreds of drafts in like a saved folder that I haven't published yet, right? And like, let's say there's 100 of them, 40 of them I go to read, like I reread them, and like maybe this is something, and I'm just like, no, this is shit. Yeah. Or like, you know what? I wrote this a year ago, and now it doesn't resonate. Like now, the Kyle now can't relate to that Kyle a year ago anymore. Like right. I've just changed. I don't agree with that version of me anymore, right? And I can scrap it. But then there's other ones where I'm just like, you read a couple lines or maybe just one sentence from it, and you're just like, ooh, that's something.
Sure.
And you're like, I wrote that, in October of 2019, but that one sentence now, 4 years later, I'm like, okay, we can do something with that. Yeah. And now that I go down a completely different path, and maybe it doesn't even align with the same intention that that first sentence originally had when I wrote it, but it sparked something else. And it's just, like he says, it's the act of showing up and sitting down and doing it so that
it's both.
So that you have the cumulative just like effort, right? And like, you can do it, but then also it's just, you have so many more ideas to stick to the wall, or so many more ideas that will stick. 99% of them might fall, but you're going to have that 1% that sticks because you've thrown, 99 other pieces at it.
It does take both, because like that's like that typical, the genius who's like homeless or something. Like it's like you still have to show up. You can't just be a genius, or like Good Will Hunting. Like you can be a janitor and be a genius. You have to apply. You have to show up and whatever and all that. Speaking of this book that you're talking about, like, are you still pursuing writing a book?
Yeah.
And it's going well?
So I'm writing, I'm kind of in tandem with two books. Like right now I'm writing a fiction book. It started as, me and Lauren are actually both doing this. It started as a, sort of just a journaling exercise, like writing about my struggles with relationships or whatever, but through a third party, right? Like pretending it's two separate characters, right? So I've written about 60 pages of a fiction book. I won't get into too much detail yet because it could go a million different ways.
Right. So but it's just interesting that you, did you ever think that you would be writing a book?
No.
Right.
No.
That's why I brought it up. It's like, talk about this. Did the podcast, probably not, but like, did getting back to things that inspired you to like, go on, is it the podcast? Is it Observe and Rapport? Like it's the whole thing that like led you to this decision. How long have you been thinking about doing this?
I mean, I've always wanted, like, I think I've written probably in my journal over the last few years, like I will be a #1 New York Times bestselling author, like over and over again. Like that's definitely my dream. It's like you said, like I love writing so much that if I pursued it full time, I'm so obsessed with it, and I enjoy not just the writing process, but I even enjoy like the editing process and like crafting the paragraphs and the arc and stuff, that I'm so obsessed with it. There's no way I can't be successful. I know, like I'm like so confident about it that I need to pursue it. It's just like one of those like urges. So the writing thing, it started when I had that week off, and I just had I had all day, 24/7, all those creative juices were just flowing, and one of them happened to be starting to write a fiction book. And it may never end up being anything, but it's like I said, it's just the act of showing up, and maybe there's one character from that ends up sparking another idea. So that's one, is the fiction book. Ultimately, I'd prefer to write a nonfiction book. I just spoke about this with someone today about, I enjoy reading so many different, authors of nonfiction and ways of thinking. Like Marcus Aurelius was 2,000 years ago. Dale Carnegie was 100 years ago. Ryan Holiday is today. Yeah. All these guys are writing about common threads of the struggle of humans over time, right? And I think part of what I enjoy is reading all of those different perspectives and points of views on similar things and tying them together in a theme, but also doing it from, I think there's a lot of these books are written by people in their 40s, 50s, or 60s, right? You don't see a lot of those books written by younger men or women. And that's something I maybe want to come in with the perspective. The self-doubt I have is like, well, what have I accomplished in my life that, gives me the right to write a book like that? But to me, it's really just, trying to transfer a lot of the knowledge I have in my head from the accumulation of books.
Right.
And giving it to other people that, hey, I've read, 500 books in my life, but maybe only ideas from 12 of them are actually worth reading. And instead of you having to read those 12 books, let me put them all into one book that you can read. So that's my dream, obviously.
That's the dream.
Right. Yeah.
It's kind of a shame that, I was reading something today. I don't know if you've, because you're so passionate. Like, you and I are both very passionate readers, I'd say, and especially you. But, I was reading, did you happen to read any of the articles that are circulating these days about the alarming number of New York City children who can't read?
No.
Kyle, it's like a huge fucking problem.
Really?
There's a really big problem right now in the New York City area with kids who can't read. Yeah, the New York City school system, public school system, is the biggest school system in the world. It's 1,800 schools, 1.1 million students, and only 20 of those schools out of the 1,800 meet the minimum criteria for an acceptable amount of the percentage of students that go to the school who are considered proficient readers, at least, decent at reading. So 20 schools out of 1,800 schools have the minimum number for kids who are proficient at reading. So I looked into it a little bit more, and apparently about 15 years ago, there was all this research that got done into what exactly is going on in the brains of expert readers, which, by the way, you and I are expert readers, by the way. Like technically speaking, you and I look at a word and we don't necessarily sound it out, and we just recognize we can look at a sentence, you and I,
can skim it
and
over,
just skim it and regardless, we'll have the information from the sentence without actually going through each word individually. We're considered expert readers, you and I. And what's going on with kids is, they thought, since that's the way that experts do it, why don't we just bypass all of the phonetics and all that, and we'll just teach kids entire words to memorize, which in a way you can't blame them, because, well, that's the way experts do it. And, again, though, it is kind of stupid, because why would they think that a 5-year-old can do it, right?
That's really dumb, yeah.
And you've seen those paragraphs of like English words where the first letter and the last letter are in the right spot, but the letters in the middle are mixed and in the random spots.
And
you can still read through it. A normal reader can read that at a speed that's kind of slower, but still get through it. Expert readers like you and I could probably just read at the same speed. So that data and that research mixed with the original is like, let's just teach kids the whole word. We'll bypass that whole thing. Maybe they'll learn quicker or whatever. So there's two problems with that. One is that just because that's how experts do it doesn't mean that that's how they learn to do it, right? And the second thing is it's turned English into like a form of Chinese, in the sense that words are now symbols to kids. And they're not really going through the phonetics, because the whole point of having an alphabet, like English is an alphabetic language. Like you're supposed to learn whatever 40
hooked on phonics, man.
Right, exactly. Hooked on phonics. You're supposed to learn the 40 or so whatever noises that the alphabet makes, and then you learn to group certain letters together.
Sound it out.
Sound it out. Remember when we were kids? Sound it out. You group little letters together. Those make like th for th, f for ph. You learn those things, and that's the phonics of it, the phonetics. And then eventually that becomes whole sentences, and then you can read. You can get through words, but you're going through the words themselves. It's the whole point of having an alphabetic language. And so now kids are like, they'll come across a word they've never seen before, and they have no clue what to do. They can't sound it out. They don't know the phonetics of the alphabet. So I couldn't believe this dude, kids can't read now. And it's not, you can't blame COVID, because this has been going on for a long time. And mixed with the COVID thing and the homeschooling and all the virtual learning, it's like there are kids who can't read in New York in 2023 in America.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not knowledgeable enough on the school system and how, like, the teaching techniques that they have nowadays to really speak on what's the best or what's
the mayor talked about this. Eric Adams addressed it. He's like,
clearly that's a problem. I mean, and there's also the value of like understanding other languages too. Like I think taking Spanish in high school, and I think I have a decent grasp of Latin too. Like knowing the root of certain words too is so helpful to like know, there's so many commonalities obviously between Latin was the basis for Spanish, and then Spanish was the influence for a lot of American or English words rather. So knowing multiple languages too, but also knowing like English has certain, sounds that don't exist in other languages. But I mean, it's so that actually, I didn't know that about the reading levels in schools, but
interesting, right? It's terrible.
When you asked me about books and I said I was talking about that with someone today, I got connected with someone actually who works for a foundation that talks to young men, coming out of high school and into college who are struggling, whether with education, just like they're behind in learning, or they're getting into drugs, or just can't really find their way in life. And this person approached me. I won't get into it yet because I don't really know what exactly my involvement's going to be. But they approached me and saying like, hey, like a lot of the stuff on your blog is kind of talking to a lot of these things about the struggles of young men, and we think the value of reading the books and the knowledge you gain from books is something that needs to be shared with young men who are in these positions. And I was like, absolutely, like I'll jump through hoops to do that. Like, that's the shit I'm
dream come true
about. Yeah, and I mean I know like how many different types of struggles there are between education, there's drugs, there's relationships, there's social media, there's addiction problems, there's fatherless or motherless homes, and there's what I was talking to him about was it's amazing how regardless of how high status you are, right? If you looked at me, if these kids looked at me, I came into their school or whatever, they'd be like, hey, here's a wealthy, or mildly successful, 30-year-old. He didn't have to have any struggles in life, but it's like, well, outwardly, no. Like I didn't really have any struggles, but inwardly, my vulnerabilities are probably the same as everyone in this room.
We're all human beings.
You know what I mean? We're all human, and that's why I got talking about like Marcus Aurelius. I'm like, this guy was the emperor of Rome, one of the most powerful people on the earth, and his journal entries from 2,000 years ago are the same shit that me or you or the CEO of a bank would be writing about struggling to get out under the covers because it's so comfy in there, and why go out and work hard today. And
there's a great famous photograph of a homeless man spray painting Carpe Diem on a brick wall. Seize the day. And it's like, does that apply to him even?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It applies to, it's human.
Right.
Seize the day. Like, it doesn't matter if you're Steve Jobs, God himself, or some homeless guy. It's an individual struggle. That's everyone's story.
Mm-hmm.
Go on.
No, I mean, you hit the nail on the head.
No, but it's so horrible that's the education that's going on in the city. It's at the same time, I mean, these kids, they're being, we got into this because we're passionate about this, right? And like, I read that and I was like, man, so the kids are going through life right now without, like, we know how to sound it out. We learned a different way of learning how to read. There's a difference. One's called full word learning, and what we learned is balanced literacy. That's what it's called. Our process of learning the phonetics and getting every letter down to its letter and its sound and all that.
Yeah, like think about the word like subtlety.
Right. Like I came across the word perspicacity the other day. I'd never seen it written down, but I got through it. Yeah. I was like perspicacity. Okay, perspicacity. I was able to learn the word. But these kids now, and then what's I just mentioned that intelligence is like a crapshoot. There are some kids now who are so intelligent, regardless of this educational approach, that they're getting so good at that they're fooling the teachers into thinking that they know how to read because they can memorize a million things, and their parents are like, hey, I put a book in front of my kid, he can't read it, and they're like, you're out of your mind, he's a genius, he's been reading every day in school, and it's like, yeah, because he knows those words.
Mm-hmm.
He can't find. It's such an interesting little problem.
There's not enough value put on the meta skill of learning how to learn too.
Right.
I think a lot of school and I think a lot of guys like my high school was so challenging, and they demanded so much of us that we actually ended up like more so hacking our way to passing tests than actually learning.
Mm-hmm.
And you do this like, rote memorization of certain things, and like, what you need to know for the test.
Right.
So instead of actually learning it through experience or through applicable, discussion in class, you kind of just figure out, like, kids are smart, right? Kids are savvy. They're going to figure out ways to do the least amount of work, right? And they're smart with that. So it's like, teach them how to be efficient and economical in how they learn, because that is the skill that they'll use for the rest of their life.
Totally.
Like, I'm not going to learn anything by hacking my way to get a 97 on that test, because in 20 years, when I need to learn something and I can't hack it, like, what do I do? But if you teach kids at a young age with skills like reading to learn how to learn, so break it down into the micro, right? Start at the smallest possible stage, like with the cr sound, right? Start at the small and then slowly expand to the big, and do it through, intentional practice each day. Like, it's like learning guitar, learning drums, right? You start with like going really slow. Fundamentals, right?
That's it.
And that's how you learn anything.
It's the problem is, it's the same people. It's the same thing with bullying and self-esteem and participation trophies.
And it also, sorry to cut you off.
No, it's okay.
But it also applies to self-worth. Like, if you know you're competent enough to learn something and you did it through hard work over the course of a few months, now that also attributes to a higher self-worth.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I worked with my teacher, I put in the hard work, and I learned it. Like, I put in my own effort, and I got the rewards of my own effort, and now I have a higher self-worth because I know I'm not doing the shameful act of just like cheating or like hacking through it.
Exactly. That's what's going on in school, is like they're just, because it's hard.
And to be clear, I also did cheat a lot in high school.
Yeah, well, we all did, but like
that wasn't perfect.
It's of course, but like it's about the fact that the education, the faculties now are taking away the struggles in every sense. No bullying, self-esteem, participation trophies. You don't have to learn the fundamentals; just memorize the words. Like, it's like, what are we doing? Like, getting bullied is when you say, I got bullied, dude. Like. We kind of prepared a couple of questions for this episode or whatever, and one of the questions I was going to ask you is, what are you proud of? And when you inevitably asked me the same question, I was going to say,
what are you proud of, Keith?
Right. Well, I was going to say, the fact that when I was a kid, and you wouldn't know it from, all the times we've had over the years, but I used to be really fucking shy. I really was. And I never felt comfortable being extroverted, outspoken, funny in front of other people besides my family, because I knew you guys liked me and shit. But I have this super deep fear about, like, hey, is everyone going to like me? I don't want to look like an asshole, whatever. But I was in school and I was kind of getting like picked on, a little bit, like, not like in a beat up way, but just dismissed. Shut up, whatever. But regardless, you go to the lunchroom, you sit at the fucking lunch table that you weren't necessarily invited to, you open your mouth, you introduce yourself, you have to be courageous, you have to, lay it on the line. Here's my ass. You can either stab me or you can embrace it. Like, what are you gonna do?
Mm-hmm.
And you got to have that like bravery to you. And kids now, because there's no bullying, you can't be mean, you can't tell anyone they can't sit here. Like, I'm not trying to be like an old boomer about it, but it all goes down to the fundamentals. Like, you have to build up these skills. And it's manifesting now since the helicopter parents or whatever took over about 15, 20 years ago. Kids literally can't read because they never learned it's the hard way, but it's the right way. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard.
Yeah, and you also have to make it fun, right? Like,
yeah.
Forcing kids to read Catcher in the Rye.
Ugh.
Like,
hey, it's actually a good book.
I never read it. I'm
it's not that bad.
I'm trying to think of a better example for a bad book.
Raisin in the Sun. Ugh.
Yeah, like,
what a drag.
Forcing kids to read books that are, in my opinion, when you're in like 8th grade, you shouldn't be reading some of those
cares?
books. Like, you don't get, like, let the kids read Harry Potter.
Right.
Like, let the kids read the book.
Choke by Palahniuk.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. Guy gets his asshole sucked out through a fucking vacuum pump
like
in the pool.
You want kids to like read books that they enjoy until they enjoy reading books. You know what I mean? Like,
gotta make them.
You gotta
give
them
something.
And it's another cliche of it's not challenging. But you have to make it something that doesn't just suck, right? You have to make it enjoyable. You have to make them You have to make them want to be part of the process,
right?
And reading shouldn't have to feel like homework all the time.
And hey, if you're an inner city teacher out there, like, I get it. It's tough. you know? And you just want to go to work and go home and just teach the kids what the curriculum says. But like, look, people can't read. We're getting to a point where it's like, what the fuck are we doing? It's 2023, Kyle.
Yeah.
The mayor is addressing the fact that kids can't read.
So wait, and I'm changing subjects back to the question of, though, what are you most proud of? So you talked about being bullied as a kid. Was it overcoming that shyness, kind of?
It's just a weird question, you know? What am I most proud of? I mean, I have a daughter. I have a wife.
Not most, but what are you proud of in general?
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess in the context of, like, you know, when I think about myself as an individual, what am I proud of? I'm proud of the fact that I developed my personality at a young age because I was shy, and I went through life being shy, and I was like, I'm proud that I had the wherewithal to go, fuck that. I'm not going to go through life that way. I'm going to have some courage and act out and see if I get accepted or not for being the way I am. And I'm glad that I did that, because a lot of people don't do that. They're too scared, you know, and I'm just proud that because like that expanded into this show, and you and I being so close, and my friends and my family and my wife and my daughter, like, you know, you break out of your shell. I'm kind of proud that I did that, because not everyone does that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. What about you? What are you most proud of? What are you proud of? You can stand in front of it and go, look at that shit.
I think about it in two ways. There's, what do I intrinsically feel proud of that I did myself? And there's a number of things, right? Like, you can go down the list of things that I have accomplished, right? Like, and through hard work and through effort, right? Like, I used to be a fat kid. I lost weight and got into really good shape.
I forgot all about that.
And were fat. I ran triathlons. I ran a marathon. You know, I climbed the corporate ladder in a sense, and worked for successful companies, and I'd done a lot there. And now I'm a volunteer firefighter. So, like, you look at that on paper, and I also have started a blog, and, you know, I'm writing and do freelance and do a podcast with my cousin, and like, all those things on paper are really cool. I'm proud of them. I'm proud to tell people about those.
Me
things.
too.
But I think the more important way I look at it is, there's this, I forget who said it. It might have been George Washington or one of those, you know, one of those guys that
one of those
quotes all get attributed to. But it's the way you should look at life.
DJ Khaled, maybe.
The way you should look at life is, what do you want it to say on your epitaph, and work backwards from there.
Oh,
so
wow.
And
wow. How have I never heard that?
Yeah, I don't know who said it. I can look it up, but I think of like my grandpa Brennan's like funeral, right? And it's all of the things that no one is saying, oh, he accomplished this, and everyone's just saying like how good of a person he was, how much they impacted their life, how they felt when he was around, right? And I think that's what I ultimately want to be proud of when I do end up passing away is, was I a good man to my family, my friends, to my wife, to my eventual kids? Like, was I someone who made a lasting positive impact on people's lives? Are there going to be a lot of people who show up to my funeral? And
you ever think about that? You ever think about your funeral?
And
what do you think they're going to say? What if you died tomorrow? What do you think people would say?
Oh, man,
I mean, it's like such a horrible thing to talk.
But I think that's part of like what we're doing right now is like, people will say like, look, these two guys were so passionate about sharing like wisdom and knowledge, and like they just were voracious about sharing it with the world. Like, it wasn't out of like, we're not doing this for money. We're doing this like we both worked like
I worked today.
We both woke up at what, 5 a.m. this morning.
5
Like, we worked a full day, and we ate dinner. We barely saw our wife and your kid, and came here, and we're doing this, and like, we're not making a dime off it. I think that is something that people will hopefully find really, you know, lasting about us, is that we want to create things that last. And maybe no one ever, maybe 10 people listen to this, but like, hopefully 2 of those 10 people maybe heard something really insightful. Maybe they heard that epitaph quote and were like, that's really cool. And that's it. You know, I'm happy with that.
I'm proud of that too. I'm proud that we had, because a lot of people want to do this too. You know, people don't admit it, but they do, and they do, and they don't. You know, and we did, and fuck that. You know, because we were like, let's just do it. I mean,
it's like you sitting at the table with kids when you were shy.
Right.
Right? Like the first day, you weren't all of a sudden an outgoing guy, but you do it enough times, you push through it.
Right.
You keep showing up.
I remember one time.
That's the theme of this podcast. You just keep showing up, right?
Just keep showing up.
Yeah.
And someone's got to do it. Someone's got to
do the Observe and Rapport podcast.
Of course, but like Rick Rubin, the idea happened.
Right.
It was there. It was this thing, and I texted you, and I was like, "What do you think?" And you were like, "Sure." And I was like, "Okay, I'll come over whenever with this and that and the other thing." And the first episode completely shit the bed. You remember? We didn't even get to record it because we fucked up.
Look at this. We thought we were going to do a panel of questions today. To the podcast, and Keith showed up at my door today, and he goes, "So how do you want to do the podcast? Do you want to do questions?" And we were both just like, "No, fuck it. Let's just sit down, hit record, and see what happens." Because hopefully you guys enjoy it. I
don't know. Hopefully you do.
Maybe questions are probably better.
Maybe we'll get to the questions next time.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that we did this, pal. Again, for the 8th time.
Just keep showing up.
Just keep showing up. Just keep showing up.
That's it.
Love it. All right man. That's it. Good night.